Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Not by a person or an animal, but by something else? Something that doesn't belong in this world? That's how it started for us. A feeling, a presence. And by the end, we wished we'd never left the city. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway. Just me, my husband Mark, and the quiet of the woods. No distractions, no work emails, no noise. Just us. We'd picked a small campsite deep in the pine forest, far from any trails or other campers, the kind of place where you could hear your own heartbeat. The first night was perfect. We cooked dinner over the fire, laughed about old memories, and watched the stars. But as we zipped ourselves into the tent, I felt it, a prickling on the back of my neck. Like someone was standing just behind me watching. I turned around, but there was nothing there, just the trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. "You okay?" Mark asked, noticing the look on my face. "Yeah," I lied. "Just thought I heard something." The next morning, I woke up to an empty tent. Mark was already outside making coffee. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing me a steaming mug. I didn't tell him about the dream I'd had, the one where I was standing in the woods, surrounded by tall, thin figures with no faces. They didn't move, they just watched. "Yeah," I said again. "Great." But as the day went on, the feeling didn't go away. It got worse. While Mark fished by the lake, I stayed at the campsite trying to shake the unease. That's when I noticed the marks, scratches. Deep, jagged lines carved into the bark of the trees around our tent. They hadn't been there yesterday. "Mark, come look at this," I called, my voice trembling. He examined the scratches, frowning. Probably just an animal, a bear maybe. But I knew better. Bears didn't carve perfect, deliberate patterns into trees, and they didn't leave footprints that looked almost human. That night, the feeling was unbearable. We sat by the fire, but I couldn't relax. Every sound, every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me jump. "You're being paranoid," Mark said, trying to reassure me. "It's just the woods. It's supposed to be quiet." But it wasn't quiet. Not really. There was a rhythm to the silence, a pulse. Like the forest itself was alive, and it was waiting for something. When we finally went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the tent ceiling, listening. And then I heard it, a voice, soft, almost a whisper coming from outside. "Come out." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. "Mark," I whispered, shaking him awake. "Do you hear that?" He sat up, groggy. "Hear what?" "The voice, it's saying, 'Come out.'" He listened for a moment, then shook his head. "It's just the wind, babe. Go back to sleep." But it wasn't the wind. The next morning, Mark was gone. I woke up to an empty tent, just like before. But this time, his sleeping bag was cold. "Mark?" I called, stepping outside. No answer. The fire was out. The campsite was silent, and the scratches on the trees, they were everywhere now, covering every trunk, every branch. I searched for hours, calling his name until my voice was raw, but there was no sign of him, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing, just the scratches and the whispers. They followed me as I packed up the campsite, my hands shaking. They followed me as I hiked back to the car, the forest closing in around me. "Come out, come out, come out." I never found Mark. The police searched the woods for weeks, but they found nothing. No evidence, no clues, just the scratches on the trees. I still hear the whispers sometimes late at night. They don't say, "Come out," anymore. They say something else. "We have him." And I wonder, if I'd gone out that night, would I have found him? Or would the forest have taken me too? It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway. 4 friends, a secluded forest, and no cell service. But by the second night, we realized we weren't alone. And the whispers, they weren't coming from the wind. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was Friday afternoon when we arrived at Black Pines National Forest. The kind of place that looks like it's straight out of a postcard. Tall trees, crisp air, and the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the last people on earth. But silence can be deceiving. There was me, Alex, the planner who always overpacks. My best friend Jess, the skeptic who thinks every horror story is just a raccoon in the bushes. Then there was Ryan, the joker who brought a karaoke machine instead of a first aid kit. And finally, Sam, the quiet one who always seems to know more than they let on. Things started off fine. We roasted marshmallows, told stupid jokes, and even tried to scare each other with ghost stories. But by nightfall, the mood shifted. Sam was the first to notice it. The way the trees seemed to close in around us. The way the firelight didn't reach as far as it should have. At first, we tried to laugh it off. "It's just the wind," Jess said. But the whispers didn't sound like wind. They sounded deliberate, like someone or something was trying to talk to us. And then we heard it, a voice, clear as day, calling Ryan's name from the woods. Ryan froze. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked. None of us wanted to admit it, but we had. And then the voice called again. This time, it was closer. Without thinking, Ryan took a step forward. "Ryan, don't!" I shouted. But it was too late. He disappeared into the trees. We searched for hours, calling his name until our voices were raw. And then we found him. Or at least we thought we did. Ryan was standing in a clearing, his back to us. "Ryan!" Jess called out. He turned around, and that's when we saw it. His eyes, they weren't his anymore. They were black, completely black. We didn't stop running until we reached the campsite. The fire had gone out, and the tents were torn to shreds. And Ryan, he wasn't Ryan anymore. He just stood there, staring at us with those empty eyes, repeating the same phrase over and over. "They're waiting for you." In that moment, we realized we weren't just dealing with some creepy forest legend. This was something older, something darker, and it had been waiting for us. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Ryan, we never saw him again. The police searched the forest, but they found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no footprints, nothing. It was like he just vanished. People ask me why I still go camping after what happened. Maybe it's because I need to prove to myself that I'm not afraid. Or maybe it's because I know the truth. The forest doesn't let go that easily. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I still hear the whispers calling my name. Some places aren't meant to be found. Some places find you. And once they do, they don't let go. This is the story of how I stumbled upon one of those places and how it changed me forever. I've always been a loner. I prefer the quiet of the wilderness to the noise of people. So when I decided to go camping, I didn't tell anyone. I just packed my gear, grabbed my map, and drove until the road ended. The spot I picked was perfect. A small clearing surrounded by towering pines with a creek running nearby. It felt safe, like the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. But I was wrong. The first night was uneventful. I set up my tent, built a fire, and cooked a simple meal. As the sun set, I sat by the fire, listening to the crackle of the flames and the gentle rush of the creek. That's when I noticed it. A sound, faint but unmistakable. A low rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat. Oh, I told myself it was just the wind or the water. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't coming from the creek. It was coming from the ground. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the silence. But as I lay in my tent that night, the sound grew louder. Thump, thump, thump. The next morning, I woke up exhausted. The sound had kept me up all night, pulsing in my ears like a drum. I decided to explore the area, hoping to find the source of the noise. Maybe it was an animal or some kind of natural phenomenon. But the deeper I went into the woods, the stranger things became. The trees here were different. Their bark was blackened as if burned, and their branches twisted unnaturally like they were reaching for something. The air was colder too, even though the sun was high in the sky. And then I found it. A hole. It was in the middle of a small clearing, perfectly round and about 3 feet wide. The edges were smooth, like they'd been carved by hand, and the sound, it was coming from inside. I knelt beside it, peering into the darkness. The thumping was louder now, almost deafening. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing into the void. No answer, just the thumping. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound was unbearable, vibrating through the ground and into my bones. I tried to leave. I packed up my gear and started hiking back to my car. But no matter how far I walked, I always ended up back at the clearing. The hole was still there, waiting. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was exhaustion or curiosity or something else. But I grabbed a flashlight and climbed inside. The walls were smooth and cold, like stone. The air smelled damp, earthy, and the thumping, it was everywhere. I climbed deeper and deeper, the light from my flashlight growing weaker. And then I saw it, a chamber. It was massive, with walls that seemed to pulse in time with the thumping, and in the center there was something, a shape, humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head too small, and its skin, it was like glass, reflecting the dim light in 1,000 fractured pieces. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me with hollow eyes. I don't remember climbing out of the hole. I don't remember running back to my car or driving home. All I remember is waking up in my bed, covered in dirt, with the sound still echoing in my ears. The doctors said it was a hallucination, a breakdown caused by stress or dehydration. They gave me pills and told me to rest. But I know what I saw, and I know it's still there. I've tried to forget about the hole. I've tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But every night, I hear the thumping, and every night, it gets louder. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose me, but I do know this. It's not done with me, and someday, I'll have to go back.